You have in your packet tonight a very short memo from my office on behalf of staff recommending that all of the current bids be rejected and that we rebid this project. I want to run through a little bit of history on the project and also the reasoning behind staff's recommendations so you fully understand where we're at from our perspective. This project was bid out late last fall, and bid opening was in early December. Then over a period of probably about a month or so, there was an intensive review period by both ourselves and by the USDA. The reason the USDA is involved in this, as you'll recall, is that this project is permanent financing is being provided by a combination of grants from the USDA and also a loan from the USDA. And part of their requirements are that they concur in the award of bid to whoever the contractor is. And so they undertake an exhaustive review as well to determine whether or not they're going to concur with the recommendation of the city. Over the last week or so, we've been in close consultation with the USDA and its staff and new interim director. And at the end of that, we came to the conclusion that really the thing that was in the best interest of the city, and I'm going to emphasize that this evening, the best interest of the city and the best interest of the ratepayers, who are the people who are going to actually pay for this plant and all of its components and the several million-dollar project that it is. That it was in the best interest of those ratepayers in the city to reject all the bids. And here's the reasoning that the staff went through. And a lot of it has to do with the way the USDA loan and grant program works. Is that essentially the USDA loans up to the amount that they think that you can take, and then they provide some grant funding beyond that to complete the project. And when this bid was originally put together, it was contemplated that, based on the engineer's estimates, that there were several components to the project that, while they would have been really nice to have and ultimately will probably need to be added to the plant, there simply wouldn't be enough money between that grant and loan program to accomplish it. Realizing that the bids came in much lower than expected, which was a good thing, there was some available space there to add back in those components to the project. In order to do that, though, we need to rebid the project. The two components that the engineers have recommended we add back into the project are to enclose the primary clarifiers, essentially putting a lid over the top of those clarifiers, and what that does is increases the temperature control over that initial processing, which means better biological action, which means better treatment, less upsets at the plant, better overall effluent product coming back out and back into the river. The other component that they would have liked to have seen in the original bid, and we didn't think we had the money for, is what's called tertiary treatment. In probably the next 10 years or so, increased standards are going to be adopted by CDPHE here in Colorado that are going to require the removal of additional components, dissolved solids, and the removal of that is going to require this tertiary treatment process. At whatever point those regulations go into effect, we are likely going to have to comply with them, and so the ability to include that component in the plant now, particularly when we can fund the vast majority of it with grant money, is a huge bonus to our ratepayers to be able to do that at this particular point in time. The second reason was what I had alluded to earlier, which is that really adding these components back in are going to result in no appreciable increase in cost to the ratepayers, who are the beneficiaries of the regional plant and who are responsible for paying for this new plant. So that was an important component of this. Third is that there's not going to be a significant impact on the timing of construction. What we're going to lose is winter months, the harder months to be under construction anyway. As you noted in my memo, I said we anticipated the turnaround time on getting back in front of council is about 6 to 8 weeks to rebid this, to get it back published and out for bid, get those bids back, evaluate them, and get them back in front of you. The USDA took a bit longer than it would have liked to because of turnover in staff, the retirement of a long-term member, the regional director for the program. So they anticipate that they'll be able to turn around their review much more quickly than they did before. There is some potential marginal downside, and that's probably really in the form of some potential increase in costs in the interim loan rates. which is, as you recall, the way this program works is we get essentially a construction loan. It's good for about 18 months, and then it gets taken out by the USDA loan and grant program. So there might be a marginal increase in those rates in the initial rate related to that interim loan, but it's not going to be significant in terms of the long term because the USDA rate for the loan is guaranteed at the rate that it is set at currently. So that shift of a couple of months in construction time is not going to affect ultimately what the takeout looks like on the long-term loan, which there again is why we feel like this is a good deal for the ratepayers. So that's how staff came to the conclusion that it's in the best interest of the city and the ratepayers right now to rebid this project, try to get those other components in. Engineers' estimates are that's going to be probably around $1 million worth of additional components to the plant that we'll be able to do at virtually no cost to the ratepayers, and that seems like it's a really good thing. Options available to council tonight. First is to go with the staff recommendation, which is to reject all the current bids and direct staff to rebid the project. That's staff's recommendation. Second is to award the bid to any of the bidders without the concurrence of the USDA. We currently do not have a concurrence letter from the USDA for any of the bidders. What's at risk in awarding that, just so you understand, is that the funding from the USDA potentially could go away if we award this bid to any of the bidders this evening. And the reason we say potentially could go away is that we would be a test case. The USDA has never faced a situation where a community engaged in this program has not awarded to the bidder that the USDA concurs with. So they would anticipate that it's a violation of their rules, but they've never had to face that particular situation before, and I tend to be fairly conservative about being the test case in these instances. The other one is that if we were to lose that funding, it equates to about $5 million to your ratepayers. It's a significant chunk of change over the 40-year life of that USDA loan. The loss of the grant money on the front end of a little over $2 million and the differential in going to the open market on rates versus current rates. You can stretch that out over a long period of time and play with the percentages any number of ways, but at the end of the day, it's an additional $5 million that your ratepayers have to pay, regardless whether they're paying a couple of extra dollars or several hundred extra dollars. At the end of the day, it's $5 million extra dollars that they have to pay over the next 30 years. So, with all of that in mind, it really comes back to what's in the best interest of the ratepayers is what I would say. I'm going to revolve back around to that from the standpoint of the staff, is that ultimately 2,900 current customers and whatever future customers are added to the system, those are the folks that have to pay for this. That's the way an enterprise works. We can't go out and use other tax money to fund it in other ways. Ultimately, the ratepayers have to bear the burden of the costs. And with that in mind, we just feel like we can maximize the available USDA grant funds, get the best plant possible if we go back out and rebid this project again. Like I said, we anticipate being back in front of you in 6 to 8 weeks for an award of that bid with those additional components in it. And with that, I would field any questions and turn it over to council for your decision.
Just one clarification, Karl. You're going to add work to the contract.
We are going to
explain to me why that isn't going to affect the cost to the ratepayer.
Well, the way the USDA loan program works, essentially they determine how much you can afford to borrow, and then if your costs exceed that, then they determine a grant amount that they're willing to give you on top of that. And I think of the loan amount was about $12 million. The grant amount they determined we were eligible for was $2.6 million, the maximum. Because of where the numbers are at right now, that additional work is going to fall into additional grant monies that we can take advantage of inside that 2.6. We're using a little less than $2 million worth of that grant money that would have been available right now. And so that's why we can leverage to the maximum extent possible, because we're going to wind up borrowing that $12 million no matter what. It's can we garner the rest of that $2.6 million in grant money. So that's why the additional work of right around $1 million hopefully won't cost the ratepayers or shouldn't cost the ratepayers anything additional.
So the additional work would come out of additional grant money?
Right.
Thank you.